grew up, unfortunately, in a family of victims, professional victims, people who would never take accountability for their actions and what they did, and they would choose to blame others. And that resonated with me my whole entire life. And then when I got into the working world and started to see it, it's like, this is a real problem. And now, if you look at the last probably 2 or 3 years, I think it's gotten worse. And I think what we're seeing societally are people who, and I say blame is like a drug, who will not take accountability and ownership for their actions and rather create a villain, hence the villain trap.
Chris, I am so excited to have you on the episode today. You have a book that you'll be sharing with us in a moment, but you were just sharing with me that you had a really great move. You and your wife had just renovated a home, so you have a lot of wonderful things that are going on. We actually realized we have a connection living in Georgia, so just so great to be able to connect. This is one of my favorite things about the podcast. Before we dive into the topic around leadership and what you have termed the villain trap, which I'm very anxious and curious to learn more about. I'm really excited to hear more about it, but I want you to share a little bit about your background and what has brought you to your journey so far in leadership.
Yeah. Well, first off, Rebecca, thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited and always cool to have to be talking to a local person here in Georgia versus people all over the world. So happy to be on and thank you. Yeah, we just finished up a move and we've basically moved to our retirement place where we're going to spend the rest of our life. So that's kind of cool. But a little bit about me. 5 years, I think, in retail. I've had the privilege of working for some amazing companies like Target Corporation and Home Depot. And my last, what I refer to as real job, was with Toys R Us. Everybody remembers Toys R Us. And I was the head of operations and customer experience. And I've always been in those roles and in one way or another, whether it's operations or customer service, working with people. So I'm very passionate about it, just about the quality of service and how businesses show their appreciation for people who are choosing to spend their hard earned money with that business. And so the last several years, I spent the last 5 years the CEO of a market research and data analytics company, which was pretty cool because I got to work with a lot of businesses in different verticals and really kind of learn about their pain points and what they suffer from. And I stepped down because I'm moving towards that retirement phase of my life. But the last 4 years, I was writing a book. And I always tell people that the book is 54 years in the making, literally. But the last 4 years, I got serious about it. And I got serious about it because in my professional career, one of the things that I noticed leading teams is how people allow themselves to use blame to limit their growth, right? And I saw this and it just became more and more. And I can share a little bit more personally about when I grew up. I always like to say that I grew up, unfortunately, in a family of victims, professional victims, people who would never take accountability for their actions and what they did, and they would choose to blame others. And that resonated with me my whole entire life. And then when I got into the working world and started to see it, it's like, this is a real problem. And now, if you look at the last probably 2 or 3 years, I think it's gotten worse. And I think what we're seeing societally are people who, and I say blame is like a drug, who will not take accountability and ownership for their actions and rather create a villain, hence the villain trap, right? And what people don't understand, because it's really easy, Rebecca, for you to sit there and go, well, that's not me. I don't do that. I would never do that. I don't blame people. I take responsibility and ownership. But the reality of it is we all do it. There's not a person out there that's not doing it hundreds of times a day without even thinking about why you're doing it or even if you're doing it. And so the essence of the book was to help people really kind of get out of that trap, to identify it. What happens? What does it feel like when I'm starting to go down this victim road or blame or villainize? And more importantly, how do I get out of it? And that really is the essence of the book. It teaches people how to go from a victim mindset to an ownership mindset. And it's a labor of love for me. I talk a lot about personal references in the book about my time growing up. And then I use a lot of anecdotes from just my leadership career over 35 years. And the cool thing about it is people have come back to me and said, I wish I had this book 30 years ago when I started my leadership journey. because I think the way we kind of break it out in the book, people don't think about it that way. So it's a very eye-opening thing.
Would you say is a unique perspective that has been helping people have that epiphany, aha moment of like, oh wow,
Yeah,
I wish I
yeah,
did have that
yeah.
X number of years ago. What is that little kernel, if you don't mind sharing a
Sure,
little
yeah.
teaser?
Well,
Yeah.
I think I would break it down this way: is it's easy when you're angry at somebody. When you and I have a fight or an argument, and I'm mad at you and you're mad at me. That's very, very clear, right? It's what I those kind of situations are loud and they're messy and everybody knows it. Boy, Rebecca and Chris just had a blowout, right? That's not what we're talking about. There's already millions of books out there on that subject. What I'm talking about is this subtle little thing that happens. It's a trigger that happens when somebody does something, or it could be a person or it could be a thing. When something happens that goes counter to how you think and view yourself, right? And the example that I like to use is because it's relatable. I think we've all in business put together some form of presentation or document, and then you're very proud of that, like you spent a lot of time and energy doing it, but then I send it to you, Rebecca, for feedback, and I say, Rebecca, can you just give me some feedback? My expectation, because I view that as I put a lot of work into it, it's really good. My expectation is you're going to come back to me and say, that was amazing, Chris, it was awesome, right? But what happens when you send that document back to me and it's just chock full of red lines and comments and things like, oh, here, you could change this. That's what I refer to when I refer to a trigger. It's a trigger that happens because I've received something that's counter to how I see it. And so what I end up doing is going, I see Rebecca's after my job, right? Like she's doing this because she doesn't like me. She wants to do this. And I begin to do two things: create a story and create a villain. And that is the difference, because I'm not yelling at you. I'm not screaming at you. Nothing on the surface looks like it's changed. But what happens is I begin to formulate this story and I begin to put you in this kind of villain mentality. And suddenly my attitude towards you changes, right? Maybe you're not coming to the same meetings you used to. Maybe I'm not including you on those emails anymore that you used to get. Maybe I'm starting to isolate you. Rebecca, you don't need to be a part of this. The next presentation I do, you don't get it, right? That is how blame and creating a villain silently erodes culture in an organization and at home, by the way. I talk about it, the villain trap at home. But that, I think, is the uniqueness of the book. A lot of people have heard about the victim loop, and how you get stuck in the victim loop. But this takes a different spin on it. And it goes down this road of this kind of quiet erosion of trust that is really the silent killer in an organization. And it's happening in just about every organization you can think of right now, especially.
This is it really is a unique perspective. And now my wheels are turning too and thinking about what are those moments when we have those triggers, and the perception that you're talking about is our own mind creating something that might not be realistic or accurate, or maybe the perception of how we want something to be received is not aligned with how it actually is received and then reshared. So I'm sure you have many wonderful examples in the book. So we'll all have to run and grab a copy so that we can examine our own lives. But I appreciate that, and I appreciate you extending it to personal life as well, because we talk not in every episode, but usually guests and I end up chatting about how we're leaders in all of our life, not just the work related portion. And so I could certainly see how being able to have an awareness around what your triggers are or when you are being triggered, and then examining that to have a better, I guess it's not even conflict resolution, right? But it's more like, or maybe it's an internal conflict resolution. I don't know. What are some of your thoughts around how that develops within us and then how we project that out?
Yeah, it's a great subject and discussion. So, we're always talking about our differences as humans, right? And how different everybody is. But there's a lot of similarities, and one of the similarities that we all face is our ego. And our ego is there to protect us. That's what it's there to do. It's there to make sure that this image we have of ourselves stays intact. And we all do it as leaders. I mean, I've worked with thousands of leaders who you could just look at them and go, boy, they're really full of themselves. They really think that they're amazing, that they're, this really, that's what they've created. That's the story they've created about themselves. And I'm not saying that they are or they aren't. I'm just saying you can tell that's the story. So the first time that they encounter something that's counter to the story that they've told them, it's uncomfortable. It's what we call cognitive dissonance, right? It means that that's not what I expected. It's kind of like when you go to grab the milk carton and you go to take a swig and it's sour. Your brain automatically goes, that's not what you expected. And there's a physical revulsion when that happens, right? And so we all face that. And whether that's work or whether that's at home, we all have this in us and we all deal with it on a regular basis. The trick is to get yourself out of the story. And here's a really good example. To use the example with people who have teenagers, right? Because what happens is, mom's working all day. She comes home. She knows the kids at home. She knows that she told them to do the dishes and to do these things before she gets there. So in her mind, she's created this story, right? That when I get home, the dishes are going to be done, the chores are going to be done. But then when she gets home, she finds, the kid on the couch with the feet propped up on the phone and the dishes aren't done. So what happens? And then she begins to tell herself a story. And that story is, he doesn't ever listen to me. He doesn't do what I say. He's lazy. He's blah, blah, blah. He's the whole bit. But that's not necessarily the real story, right? There could be a thousand other things that maybe he just got home. Maybe he was late getting home. Maybe this, but it's the story that we tell ourselves that erodes the relationship. And we're harder on friends and family than we are on coworkers, right? We really are because we're quicker to form that story. So that's what happens. And then, there's 5 stages of the villain trap. And one of that is that trigger. But once that happens, your ego's like, yeah, well, you know what? This isn't your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You were very clear in your instruction. So it's got to be the other person's fault, right? And then you begin to do things to help you fill the blanks in that story. Justification. I told him to do it 2 days ago and he didn't do it. So now he's doing it maliciously, right? And then that story gets more truthful to you. Then the villain creation comes, and now it's, I don't like you anymore because you're a bad person, right? And so again, it's not this, I'm going to yell and scream and throw things and be angry. It's this quiet, I just treat you a little bit different. I act a little bit different around you, and I begin to marginalize and minimize you, right? Oh, I'm not going to ask you to do anymore. I'm going to do it myself. And that's a really dangerous place, whether you're at work or at home, for people to get, because all relationships are built on one thing, and that one thing is trust. And if you don't have trust in the relationship, doesn't matter, work or home, you don't have a relationship. And that's exactly what creating villains does. It erodes that trust factor to the point where you completely ruin that relationship.
Those are such great points, Chris. And it makes me realize too, in marketing and storytelling and anything where you are telling stories like theater, the arts, etc., we think about the hero's journey. And when it comes to marketing, it's very helpful in understanding our audience and the journey that they're going on. When we think about ourselves, though, we're putting ourselves on the journey and we're the hero or heroine, and we maybe forget that there are other characters living their own heroine's journey, and they have other characters playing parts in their life as well. And so it makes me think, kind of realize too, that when we're going through those different scenarios, we see ourselves as the hero and everybody else is that antagonist in
Yeah,
some degree,
that's
if
exactly
we
right.
allow it to spiral in that way. Yeah. And the other thing, just how our imaginations can spiral because humans are, I would say, innately curious. I'm sure there's science behind that I'm not aware of, but because we have a curiosity or we have to fill in that gap in understanding and reasoning, we are making that story to connect between the thing that I asked that didn't happen here and what I'm observing now. And we're making that assumption by filling it with the storytelling that you're describing.
That's right.
So it brings me to a question of, well, in business, oftentimes we hear that you have to micromanage someone to hold them accountable. And I'm a firm believer that there's no excuse for micromanaging. That's my personal opinion. But if you are to take that approach of, well, we want to hold people accountable while giving them that trust, because I don't believe you can trust someone if you feel like you have to micromanage them. So, how do we get to that place where we can both trust, whether you're the mom with the teenagers, or in my case, the animals, a little different, but, or the leader with the team, and you want to be able to trust them, you also need to hold them accountable too. How do you develop that kind of relationship where it's healthy and you're thriving?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Micromanagement to me is nothing more than an expression of insecurity. And it always has. Any leader I've ever worked for or been around who is inherently a micromanager has some really big insecurity issues. They're not comfortable with themselves, right? That's how they express that. And that's the ego. The ego talking to say, I've got to do everything myself around here because nobody else can do it, right? And so that's really all that is. It's this approach that we take that our ego says you just need to do it yourself, reduce the risk, don't take the chance that Rebecca might not be able to do as good as you can do, right? And there's a humility issue here. There's one of the things that I think, one of the characteristics I think we have completely lost as a society is humility. We're no longer able to say things like, oh, I didn't know that, or I screwed up, my fault, my mistake. And I look at that because I think what social media has done to us is perpetuated this false perception that we're perfect. Look at me, look at my life, look at my picture, right? And that's why part of the book, as I say, when you do that, you're giving your power away because there's tremendous power in saying, I don't know how to do that, or you're better at that than I am. And that leads to that micromanagement piece because what great leaders, servant leaders do is they pick the right person for the job based on their skill set and what they bring to the table. And then they nurture the hell out of them, right? What can I do for you, Rebecca? That's my job. My job is to remove impediments. My job is to give you the tools and the resources and the guidance and everything you need to be as successful as possible. It leads into one of my favorite stories about, and I've said this on a couple of podcasts, but I had a leader come to me who, 6 months prior had hired somebody that they were super excited about. They were like, I can't wait to get this person on board. And they were really excited. And then, 3 months later, they're in my office saying they're not going to work out. Well, why? What happened? You were so excited about them. Well, they're just not doing what I need them to do. Right. And they're just not capable of doing it. Okay. Well, how do you know? How do you know they're not capable of doing it? Well, I've told them this and I told them that. But I would challenge all my leaders on one thing. You're not firing anybody or performance anybody until you come back to me and tell me all the things that you could have done differently to support that person in their onboarding and their journey and their growth. And when you do that, more often than not, leaders can't come back and give you that answer because it's a quick fix, right? It's like, oh, I don't like this person anymore. Maybe you challenged me, but there was a trigger moment. Now I'm treating you differently and I just want you gone. And that's really what the book helps you through. It's not only to identify how you potentially are falling into the villain trap. But remember, there's another side to this, which is if you've ever led a team, if you've ever led anybody, you have been the villain in somebody else's story. It's inevitable. And so we talk about that as well. And oftentimes you don't even know it. Like that person quit and they quit because of all of these feelings they had about you that you had no idea. Right. And so we also talk about that in the book about how do you identify that? Because that's how you lose your best employees, right? You lose them quietly. You'll never know why they're leaving. You'll never really understand it because you're not paying attention to it. And then poof, one day they're gone and you're left going, what did I do? What happened? What's going on? It's too late when it gets to that point.
All of that, all the above, Chris. So powerful, and it resonates so much, especially around servant leadership and having that awareness of yourself. I'm sure there's a degree to which we can't control how our team is always going to think about us. And if we are making a decision that's for the betterment of the team and the company, but someone disagrees with it, and then that spirals in their mind. We can't control that aspect of it, but what you're sharing and describing is that I think a really great privilege and yet responsibility of a leader to take that time to get to know their team, challenge them, understand them, and be able to reflect on yourself and how you're helping them. But I can certainly see where people can fall into the trap of not knowing what people are thinking if you don't ask too. And I feel like you have to ask for that feedback and let other people's voices be heard. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck in a
Yeah.
silo yourself.
And that's your role. Your role as a leader is to lead your people. That doesn't mean micromanage them. That doesn't mean, give them, tell them specifically what you want to do. But, I always looked at my role as a leader to assemble the right team of people. And that means different individuals, different skill sets, different backgrounds, because diversity is important. But then the second piece of it was just to do whatever I could to make them as successful as possible and realize it wasn't because of me. I used to say all the time, I'm the least important person in the company because I don't make it happen. I set a vision and a strategy, and I get that. But if I don't have people working to make the engine go or to make the wheels turn, you don't have a business. And that's why I get so sad when I see these companies making these massive concessions for CEOs and these, $1 million pay packages and corporate jets, and they're allowing them to commute from one side of the country to the other. And I look at that and I say, okay, well, I get it, but the reality of it is yeah, that person has a vision and a strategy, but what about all the thousands of people that are showing up every day and actually putting money in the cash register? We have just forgotten about those people. And we just kind of treat those people like, oh, well, if you don't like it here, go find another job. And what you're seeing now, Rebecca, and I'm 100% convinced of this over the last, 3, 4 years, you're seeing companies that never missed financial performance, that never missed guidance, that are now in real trouble. When you look at companies like Starbucks and McDonald's and others, and you look at that and you go, well, yes, consumerism in my mind is changing. The way we consume, the way we shop is changing, but people are unhappy. I've never talked to any frontline worker that said, I love my job. They say, I like it. Yeah, it's okay. But what does that tell you? And I say this all the time. Disengaged employees will never be able to deliver engaged service. And so
Mm,
when you talk about customer service and you talk about, you go on LinkedIn and look at all these influencers and all these people talking about, you need to survey, you need to do this, you need to do that. Not saying that those things are wrong. What I'm saying is they're not getting to the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is they have a cultural issue where the employees are villainizing the company and the company isn't villainizing the employees. And until they fix that, they're not going to get back to normal.
Chris, those words right there, that if anyone takes anything else away, I hope that they take that point as a second point that you've made, because that is so true. And if you're not, as a company, able to serve your customers and your clients, meeting expectations or exceeding them, you're not going to be successful and profitable. So we have to take care of our people. We have to create that environment where they feel safe and nurtured. And yet we still have the accountability, which isn't a bad thing. It's
No,
not a negative thing.
the superpower.
It is, yeah. And what you were speaking to in that sense of, one individual thinking that, I think it might be the Superman complex. I'm not sure if that's right, but it's definitely that idea of, I'm going to go in and make everything right. And then when you do that, it signals to people that you believe they have a limited capacity for whatever it is, skill set, knowledge, influence, etc. And that can be incredibly damaging to morale and to their growth. And
Yeah.
clearly, you have that passion for people and for helping others. I hope you will join us again. In the interim, where would you like people to go and find your book and
Yeah.
reach out to you,
Yeah.
connect?
Well, this is the book. It's called The Villain Trap: How Leaders Lose Power Through Blame and How to Take It Back. It's available on Amazon. There's a hardcover, there's a Kindle version, and then it's also available on Audible as a download.
That's great.
So there's 3 ways that you can go get the book. What I will say to your audience is be brave. And what I mean by that is that this isn't a book that you're going to pick up and it's going to give you warm and fuzzies. This is a book that's going to challenge you to really assess how you're leading, both at work and at home. And if you open yourself up to it, to say, I'm just going to read this as is, there's a lot of I built the book to be more almost like a workshop. So at the end of each chapter, there's some fun things that you can go through for assessments and things of that nature. But the book is just designed for you to get to your real story, because the more you blame and the more you villainize, the more you point fingers, the less accountability you take, you cloud or erode your real story. You can't grow in any capacity without undergoing some element of pain. Growth is pain. And that's kind of what this book is. And I know probably people are like, well, how am I going to read that book? Because if you really want to change the way you think about leading and decide if you've done this, because I guarantee you there's nobody that could pick up the book that says, I've never done this. We've all done it. Then it could be a very defining moment in your leadership career. So I hope people do. I hope they get out and I hope they look at it and I hope they challenge themselves to read it and then more importantly, share it with somebody.
I love that. That's great advice and call to action. And we'll have all the links below. So, folks, pick up a copy, whether you're a listener on Audible or read on digital or paper. I prefer all of the above. Chris, you are welcome back anytime.
Thank you.
Please feel free to join me. This has been a delightful conversation and really powerful. I think it's something that everybody needs to revisit too, similar to what you're sharing about your book. We can obviously have that continuous self-reflection. So I appreciate you and I appreciate our listeners of the Bad Bosses Great Leaders podcast. We'll catch you for the next episode.
Thanks, everybody.